What is the most reliable vehicle you have owned? 2 Honda CR-V broke down after a decade driving it and 189k mile, so I replaced it with a Sign X, a reskin Toyota Yaris. Never knew that weird-ass Aztec spirit animal mutant model existed. But it's been a divine gift. I bought this one at 175,000 miles and have driven it to full years, well past the miles when the Honda broke down. I still have the same battery, brakes, everything, only oil changes done. I'm just shocked how it still runs every day. I kinda dislike the CR-V. The sign is utterly amazing, and given me every reason to be a lifetime Toyota lover. 1990 Honda Accord. My dad bought it originally, gave it to my wife, and we got engaged at about 140,000 miles. We drove it to like 200,000 miles with zero problems. Sold it to my buddy's son for $600. He drove it another 40,000 miles with no problems and sold it for $600. This was like 2014. For all I know, that shit's still going. For word, that shit sounded the same at 200,000 miles as it did at like 10,000 miles. Interestingly, my parents had a 1991 Honda Accord, and that was not nearly as good a model. Some models and years just got it. My Yukon, I bought it with 100,000 miles, and now it has to 5k. It's only had regular maintenance and a water pump. It pulls a 28-feet race car trailer all over the country and takes my family off-road camping. If it wasn't for the insane fuel cost, it would be my daily driver. My wife's Volvo is a close second, 2011 XC70. Bought it at 75,000, now has 155k. It's only had regular maintenance and an alternator coupler. It does have a small oil leak currently. My Volvo is proving to be reliable as well. I've only had it a year to 5k miles, so I can't say what the future holds. 1995 Dodge Dakota. It fell apart and rotted to a point I couldn't drive it in 2015. It had around 500,000 miles on it when it got scrapped. Currently in a 2014 Jeep Trailhawk, it has 340,000 miles on it. Other than standard maintenance, have only had to replace brakes, rotors, battery and wheel hubs. It's also been wrecked 3 times. Still runs great and rides great. Hands down, I'm absolutely impressed and truly satisfied. Grew up in a Ford family. Had a BMW. Have had 5 GM vehicles. For me, Mopa has by far given me the best experience owning and maintaining. My husband had a 1984 Toyota Celica he bought used in about 1990. He drove it until about 1999. And then we gave it to my sister. And she drove it for I don't know how many years. It wasn't cared for all that well either. We bought a 1996 Camry V6 brand new with 3 miles on it. We drove it for 20 years with no problems, and then the computer went bonkers. We sold it to a mechanic at the Toyota place hoping he could get it running again, because there was nothing else wrong with it. We just couldn't wait around while they figured it out. 3rd Gen Prius. Mine had the original 15-year-old hybrid battery die this year. She served as a rural mail delivery vehicle for her last 30k. And had a lift kit with big old tires. Bought her for $5,000 at 150k because it was a former fleet car and cosmetically busted. But she did me good. Her name was Amandine. Honorary shout out to my first car in 1983 Volvo 240 with a manual trans. I sold it at 308k because the maintenance was too expensive. But it was still running fine on the original engine and transmission. Named Ingrid. My wife had a 93 Ford Aspire when we first got married. We loved that thing and regret getting rid of it. Why X amount of miles per tank no matter what? And only thing was the cable clutch linkage would slip sometimes, and you just simply have to lay under the dash and tighten the cable back up real quick. But man, that thing was always working and felt like driving a street legal go-kart. 2011 Honda Fit. Bought it brand new. It's got about 150k miles on it now. And have only had to do basic maintenance, oil, brakes, etc., and fixed the AC once. It's really a great car, and I'm so happy with it. Plus it's orange, my favorite color. The annoying issue I had with it was the hood latch sensor started malfunctioning and setting off my car alarm repeatedly over the course of a couple weeks. While I tried to figure out what was going on, replacing the hood latch was inexpensive and haven't had an issue since. The best car I ever had was a 1991 Honda Civic. It was maroon with a maroon cloth interior and had a 5-speed manual transmission. I bought it used with 85,000 miles on it in 1998 when I was 16 years old. I drove it through high school and college years and even to my first post-college job. I sold it in 2007, the day before I left for basic training, and it had 335,000 miles on it. Outside of normal maintenance, the only thing that needed replacing were the drive axles at one point. That car was bulletproof. 2012 Honda Accord 4-cylinder. Bought it back in 2015 with 30k miles on it in Southern California. Currently have 130,000 miles. Always did maintenance following the maintenance minder. Only to issue I had in the 9 years of ownership is being unable to depress the brake and move the shifter. I was able to solve that by sticking a screwdriver into the shifter release hole and the leaking rear main seal on the engine. The engine is still strong, and I can floor the car, and it will happily scream toward redline. 2012 Mazda 3 Skyactiv Touring. It was the first year with the Skyactiv engine, and when I bought it used they weren't old enough to really tell their reliability. I've had no issues with the engine, and the rest of the car has the usual Mazda 3 reliability. Bought it at about 70,000 miles. Put another 80,000 on it. And other than maintenance, a fluke belt breakage and a master brake cylinder, I've had no repairs, and probably 90 of the miles I've put on it were for a rideshare. So not easy miles. 2001 Toyota Echo. Bought it new. Had it for 20 years. Put over 200k miles on it. Still ran like brand new. My son, who was born in 2000, to learn to drive stick in it. Besides brake pads and the battery, I replaced a coil and an alternator, that's it. Also own a 1994 Tercel, 2000 Sienna, 2010 Yaris, 2013 and 2014 Corolla. All rock solid and super reliable cars. Unlike the 2013 Ford Escape in our extended family, it has been plagued with an unending string of problems since day one. Fuck Ford. A little Ford Ranger pickup. My big brother took it back and forth between Texas and New Mexico. I drove it all over West Texas, and my dad still uses it on the farm. It's nearly 30 years old. NT in the door. The tailgate is held on with zip ties and baling wire. Finding the right gear takes a bit of luck. But that little truck still starts every morning and is more reliable than a mule. I had a 2000 S10 that I drove for 15 years. The second year I rear-ended another vehicle. Smashed up my entire front end. But it was still running. I could have driven it home if necessary. For the next 14 years it took us everywhere. Bought everything I needed, and even towed our belongings when we moved both times. One kept up on the maintenance most of the time. But everything wears down eventually. Too many little repairs, and one big one at the end forced a trade-in. I had a 92 Chevy Astrovan with just over 250k on it. All of my friends laughed at me when I bought it. But by the time I lost it, everyone revered it. We had so many adventures in that thing, and it never let me down. The last thing that happened was I was hit by a drunk driver and it rolled over 1.5 times. I had minimal injuries. When I went to the tow yard to get my stuff out of it, I tried to start it and it cranked up immediately. I missed the hell out of that thing. Nissan Murano. I had a 2010 with over 150,000 miles and only did minimal maintenance before it was totaled. I have a 2020 Murano now, and it's also fantastic. My aunt got a brand new 1980 for Olds Cutlass Supreme. She drove it until it was totaled in 1989 also. My father fixed it, and my mum drove it for 3 years, then passed it to me. I drove it for another 4 years till 1996. Then my father drove it for another 5 or 6 years. That thing just wouldn't die. 1991 Ford Ranger 2.3, 5-speed. I got it out of a field with a bad trans and 100k on it. Stuck a rebuilt trans in. Did all the maintenance and have been driving it on and off for the last 24 years. It's got over 320,000 on it now. Original engine and that $300 Riemann transmission. Second would be my 85 Suzuki GS700. I put almost 100k on that bike. Daily commuting, many trips, half a dozen track days. It still ran great when I sold it. My husband bought a 2005 Honda Accord a couple of months before we got married. He drove that car until 2018, and it had 340k miles on it. He decided it was time to upgrade. We gave the car to a friend, and he drove it for 6 more months until it finally, irrevocably died. It threw a rot and wasn't worth repairing. We replaced it with a 2017 CR-V, which is still going strong, but not sure we'll get 340k miles out of it.